website. It's 23rd January 2002. And date of approval is 29th January 2002. And sometimes they put projects only after they approve it. So there is no way to have any kind of lobbying or input possibilities. And sometimes they don't put projects at all. If the company says, I don't want you to show that you give us money, then the EIB won't show it.
We were curious about what the EIB had to say about these issues, but they have refused to make any comments. On several occasions we have requested interviews with President Maystadt and EIB staff. We have also approached members of the Board of Directors. All of our requests for interviews have been refused. In 2002, the EIB provided a loan of €390 million to the British Airport Authority for the building of Terminal 5 at Heathrow Airport in London. In previous years, the airport industry, including the British Airports Authority, has received other loans from the EIB. A local residents group called HACAN, the Heathrow Association for the Control of Aircraft Noise, has been campaigning for many years against the expansion of Heathrow Airport.
I live here, yes.
And it's close by Heathrow. What do you think of that?
Well, you do have to put up with the planes going over. Some days it's more than others.
Did you know that a European institution is financing Terminal 5? Which is...
No, I didn't know anything about that.
What do you think of that?
Oh dear. Well, it's going to make it more worse again, isn't it? More planes, going over. I think Heathrow is crowded enough as it is.
We heard from two medical people stating that the noise and the air pollution was affecting people's health. There's no doubt about that, because the research has been replicated in different centres all over the world. And we've got to try and get the people in power, the decision makers, to listen. When children can't learn, at schools under the flight path, teachers are stressed out because every 90 seconds they have to stop teaching. And even babies' cardiovascular systems are affected, and people can't sleep. Now, people who've been around and living there for 50 years, they're appalled because they keep being told, oh, well, we'll just have this little bit of expansion and that's it. And then 6 months later, again, they have another little expansion and the noise is dreadful. And then they're told, well, if you don't like it, why don't you move? Well, why should you move? I mean, there are villages there that are centuries old. People have their relations buried in the churchyards. They've got their family around them. And where are they going to go? HACAN has fought the third terminal inquiry as well as the fourth, and on each occasion they were told, that this would be the last expansion.
We weren't too worried about extra terminals, but the extra terminals meant more flights. And the great worry about HACAN is the number of flights coming in. At the moment, as I say, there are flights virtually throughout the day, one every 90 seconds coming over people's homes. We think that's too much already. It'll get even worse with Terminal 5, and that's why we opposed it.
Why does an extra terminal mean extra flights?
At the moment, there is runway capacity for extra flights, but the existing 4 terminals get very, very crowded. So before they bring more passengers in, they've got to expand their terminal facilities, and that's why Terminal 5 will allow the existing runways to be used at full capacity. Over the last few months, there has been actions and direct action against Heathrow Terminal 5. People have climbed on the cranes where they've stayed for a week. They've blocked some of the roads and locked on to some of the bridges. They're complaining not just about Heathrow Terminal 5, but also about the government's expansion plans for aviation. They're saying we don't need expansion, we don't need Terminal 5, and many of the residents strongly support what they're saying. Because the residents over the last 50 years have gone through the traditional methods of complaining. The public inquiries, which I talked about, writing letters, speaking to their members of parliament, marches, and so on. It hasn't really worked. Heathrow's got bigger and bigger. Terminal 5 is now being given the go-ahead. A third runway may be on the cards, and many residents are saying they believe that direct action may be the only way forward.
They seem to be funding private organisations which should quite easily be able to get loans from elsewhere. And we were told that it was set up, the EIB had been set up to help, well, mainly disadvantaged areas, to help them regenerate. And so it sounded very extraordinary to us that this hadn't been carried out.
Is this an underdeveloped regional area?
Well, it's absolutely not. It's the level of employment is very high, and quite often they have to get people in from as far afield as Scotland, Wales, Manchester, because they can't get the staff here that they need. And that means that there's no infrastructure, there's not enough housing, and not enough hospital beds, and not enough schools, so people have to live outside the area and commute in their cars.
Well, we believe it may well be illegal that the EIB has given BAA funds for Terminal 5. And our understanding is that the EIB's charter says, one, it should not be giving money when commercial money may be available, and two, it should not be funding projects in the wealthy areas of Europe. We think it has broken its charter on both these counts, and therefore we're exploring ways in which we can challenge this in law, probably in some of the European courts.
Is the EIB as a bank a necessary institution?
It seems to me that EU funds could certainly fund regional projects in poor areas without the EIB being there at all. It doesn't need the EIB. It needs some mechanism for those funds to reach the areas where there's not so much money. But whether it needs the EIB is a very open question.
I wouldn't question completely the existence of the EIB. I would question the existence of the bank in the current form. I think the bank has more possibility to actually gather more funds than what you could get from the governments. With the current situation is they don't really fulfill this public role. They finance, as you said yourself, and as we could see in UK case, they finance big companies which have enough money to finance things themselves. Or they finance things based on the purely economical assumptions, which for them, in case of Slovakia, meant that if you close this and that amount of rail lines, then you will be profitable. I don't think it's really true, and you also need to look at the service part of the whole story. Rails is not only is subsidized in all of the countries of the European Union, for example. Why shouldn't it be subsidized in Slovakia? My main thing would be that the EIB is able to generate money better than other institutions can. And this money is needed, but the problem is that they finance wrong things.